Welcome to the Teaching a Rockstar podcast. And on today's episode, I'm going to be straight up honest with everybody. This is version 2.0. Vernon Wright and I recorded a while back, and it was world class, man. It was one of my favorite ones ever. And I'm a beta tester for some new online podcast recording on the site. And my job is to work out the bugs. And apparently, we worked out some bugs on that day because our audio files didn't work out. So we're going to do this again. And man, here's the thing: I wasn't even disappointed last time, simply because it was such a great conversation. Like I've added so much value out of it and added so much to my life just on that one conversation. I was excited. And here's what the good news is: we're going to do it again. And this way we can share this with everyone. Here we go. The Wright leader on the show today, Vernon Wright, Teaching a Rockstar podcast. Let's do this.
This is the Teach Like a Rockstar podcast with Hal Bowman.
All right, before we get this party started, here is a quick word from Boston Scally Company. I have found the absolute best caps on the internet at bostonscally.com. The Boston Scally Company is the online purveyor of caps with the most attitude. Some people refer to them as a flat cap or a Gatsby or an Ivy cap, but the cap everyone is really looking for is the traditional Boston Scally cap. Founded by the son of a lifelong educator, the Boston Scally Company designs and sells caps that capture the unique culture of the Boston people with an authentic style that is filled with blue-collar sarcasm, rugged integrity, and a truckload of attitude. Pick up the authentic Boston Scally cap at bostonscally.com.
The Teach Like a Rockstar podcast with Hal Bowman.
It's been a couple of months since we talked, hasn't it?
Couple of months, man. Yeah, about 2 months or so. But time when you're doing what you love, man, time passes, right?
That's the crazy part about this. I was thinking about, and here's a weird thing. I'm almost a little bit jealous of people who have a career that they're not passionate by, because there's one reason I'm jealous, and one reason only. I think their lives are longer because it goes by slower. When you're deep into this thing that you love and you're passionate about, man, time flies like crazy.
Well, man, it's all about the passion, right? And I had a phenomenal opportunity a little while ago, we'll call it recently, right? To speak at the Rewire 19, as the hashtag goes, Rewire 19 altogether, or the Rewire 2019 conference put on by Encourse K-12. And the great folks, Glenn Robbins and Tabernacle Schools, that hosted all of us as speakers, did a phenomenal job. And one of the things that I shared with the audiences that I was privileged to share with in my sessions was this: every single person in life, and this is my philosophy, right? One of my philosophies, one of my, if you want to call it, core values, is that every single person should have their own magnificent obsession.
Yeah.
And absolutely, they should have their own magnificent obsession. And here's the reason why I say that. Your magnificent obsession, if you're wondering, Vernon, what is that? Like, how do I know what my magnificent obsession is? What are some litmus tests, right, that I can do? Your magnificent obsession totally aligns with your value set, your core values. Your magnificent obsession causes you to work late and get up early. It drives you. It is on your mind all the time. And your magnificent obsession has at the center of it a noble cause to help and elevate others well beyond the scope of what you're currently doing. And, those are just some of the other litmus tests. We could go on for a long time. Of course, obviously, I know we have time constraints, but those are some of the things that a magnificent obsession has. And I challenge everyone that is seeing this, listening to this, whatever medium that they're using to access this conversation and this dialogue. And by the way, thank you for having me on again, Hal.
Yeah,
you're super
sure.
fun, man. Appreciate you. To really look inside yourself and be introspective and ask yourself, man, am I just going through life, or do I have my own magnificent obsession? Because it will energize you, folks, whether you're 20 years old, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, or beyond. Your magnificent obsession will energize you.
You know what it is, man? I think that that is the fuel. I think being intentional about it and writing these things down and figuring that out, like, what are the core values of this thing that I'm doing? This passion I've committed my life to. Oftentimes, I think we're just walking around, and we're there. It's there in the back of our mind, but we're not bringing it to the forefront of our mind and really getting specific about the core values. And then, what I also love is this is not just something that we do to make ourselves feel good or make ourselves better, but this is the leaders of tomorrow are sitting in our classrooms today. And this is one of those professions that makes the world a better place. Like, that's the point of the profession.
Right. And I want to say this real quick. We have a lot of folks that in the business and even in other sectors as well, right, that really use this term of innovation, right?
Yeah.
Innovation. I want to be innovative. I want my work to reflect and really to demonstrate and to show innovation. I'm going to tell you something, folks. If you retrace major breakthroughs that we all are aware of in our lives, I obviously am a proponent and a user of Apple products. Obviously, they have had several breakthroughs over the years, but even breakthroughs in science and other realms of technology and our lives and health and just many other things. Those breakthroughs, when you really go back, right, in time and you kind of peel back the layers and you dig deeper, you go beyond the surface, you find that each and every one of those breakthroughs was born out of someone's relentless commitment to do something to make life better for other people. That's a magnificent obsession.
Yeah.
Because you know what the person could have done? They could have said, well, this is great. This is a cool thing. I mean, imagine if Steve Jobs had said, well, this iPhone thing, this is really cool. I'll just keep it for me and these Apple employees. But he
Right.
didn't do that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
The late Steve Jobs, along with his team there at the time when they introduced, and I remember that, as I'm sure you do as well, and many of the folks watching this remember that when that first iPhone was released, it was groundbreaking. There really did not exist a device where you could communicate with people. It was a cell phone, right? But you could also store all kinds of different things, music, and you could store these things where you could do other types of tasks. These things called, I don't know if you've heard of them, Hal. They're called apps.
Yeah.
Are we familiar with those? Right? But born out of that magnificent obsession, man.
Yeah, I was talking about this with Todd Nasloni the other day, and we were recording together, and we're talking about social media and people that generate these giant followings. And it's fascinating is everyone who tries to create a giant following, they're just stumped by it. They can't figure out how to do it. But those people who are just putting out content, trying to make the world a better place, like unselfishly trying to give and give and give to other people, those are the people that have the most followers because they have such, you can tell it's authentic and it means like it's in their heart. They're trying to give to other people from their heart. And that's why it's so special. And that's why they generate these giant tribes of people that follow them.
Well, and I think you did a phenomenal and a wonderful job just a few minutes ago of really implicitly, you probably didn't even realize that you did it because it's so authentic about you, right? You use the term adding value. And I want to go ahead and say this to folks because I know there are a lot of folks that are out there. You and I, Hal, we were at this place at one time in our professional lives where we were, right? And so the viewers will go ahead and understand, and the listeners will understand where I'm coming from when I say that you or I were at one point in our lives at this point. There are folks that are out there and they have some level of awareness about, hey, I'm helping people. I'm doing some work. That's some good work. I may have even been told that my work is great work and it's really, truly innovative, right?
Yeah.
But when they've had those thoughts about what I would call scale, right? We don't talk about that a lot in education. We talk about it a lot in other sectors, the business sector and entrepreneurial sectors and other areas, right? We don't talk about that a lot in education. And I think that's something that we should do. But when they start to have these inner dialogues and dialogues with others about scale, they start to wonder, who would listen to me? Is there anyone that would listen to me? Is there anyone that would be interested in the message that I have to say and the message that I have to share with others? And I want to say this with all of the folks, again, that are watching and listening. Imagine this. What if myself and Hal had never said, you know what? There's value here. Let's go ahead and see how we can reach people. Ladies and gentlemen, this conversation wouldn't be happening today. It wouldn't. There would be no thing such as teach like a rock star. There would be no such thing as the right leader in my show, The Many Voices of Grit. It would not exist. And so, just like Hal and I are so grateful and blessed to have reached as many people as we have, and even in the future sense, all of the people that we're going to reach literally worldwide. I want to go ahead and say this to you. How many folks are out there waiting for the answer, and you're the person that has been destined to give it to them?
Yeah. I talked to a gentleman, his name is David Meerman Scott, and he wrote a book a long time ago, right when the social media things first started happening. And he's a marketing expert, and his contention was that the way I heard it the first time at the lecture I was at, he said there's thousands upon thousands of people looking for you. They just can't find you. They're looking for your information right now all across the globe, and they just simply can't find you because you don't put your stuff out there. And then I was talking to him later, and I said, David, that whole thing that you said was really compelling about how there's thousands of people looking for you and they can't find your information. He said, no, you misheard me. What I said was there are thousands and thousands of people who need you and they can't find your information because you haven't put it out there. Thousands of people right now. Like if you have an idea and it's in your head, it's in your heart, and you're putting down some notes on paper once in a while and brainstorming here and there are thousands of people that desperately need that information, whatever it is. They're looking for it right now and they need it. They just can't find you. And that, man, that is inspiring.
Well, and I'm going to say something here real quick, and it really just speaks to the type of guy that you are, man. And I just want to say, of course, we've talked about this offline. I want to say this online as well, unabashedly, by the way, or as I say, with zero apologies, hashtag zero apologies on, is this, folks. And it speaks again so much about you, how you mentioned, which some people would say is a matter of semantics, splitting hairs, right? A nuance, if we will. Looking for versus needing. So I want to say that one again for the folks that are out there that are watching and listening. Looking for versus needing. And so your perspective was just in the part of your normal vernacular, what you heard was people that were looking for content. They're looking for the answers, right? That's why we share and exchange information. That's why you and I are having this dialogue today, right? And we're not only just having a dialogue between ourselves, we're scaling that so that other people can take part in it, right?
Yeah.
But people that are needing, there's a different level there. And I know that some people will say, well, Vernon, that's a nuance, that's a minor thing, that's semantics between looking for and needing. Some people would even say that they're the same. But I want to say this. When you get to the point of needing something and it is truly a need, your level of interest, and really beyond that, I'm going to say this, your level of commitment to finding whatever that is and whatever the specific context is, it goes to another level, folks.
It really does.
Yeah.
I always think about it in terms of the classroom is for sure those kids walking in on the first day, like, yeah, of course I want to be the teacher that they want to have. Absolutely. Of course I do. Like when they're coming down the hall on the first day and we meet for the first time, I want them to think, yes, that's the kind of guy, that's the kind of teacher I wanted. But there's more than that. What I really want is to be the teacher that they needed. I want to give them what they want, but I really deeply want to give them what they need. And, we do the same thing in my business now when a school calls, they'll call for a convocation in August or something like that. And they'll talk to Georgia. She handles all the contracts and the travel. And many times schools will say, hey, we have this theme. Can you get him? Will you please ask him, will he talk about this? And what Georgia often will say is, yes, he can, customize that a little bit and he'll mention that and he'll work that in for sure. But please remember, you're not hiring us to give you what you want. You're hiring us to give you what you need. And those are very different. Oftentimes what people want isn't what they need. And I'm in the business of giving people what they need.
Right. And you know what and so I know I'm absolutely positive that there are leaders at different levels. Some people that are maybe instructional coaches, some people that are maybe other types of teacher leaders, some people that are in leadership at the campus level, maybe even the district level, regional level, state level, national level that are watching this dialogue and taking a part in it. And it's a rich dialogue, by the way, as I'm sure all of you are feeling the same way also. And really it's this is what it is, right? There is a level, pardon me, let me slow down, right? I'm so excited to be on here. There is a level of self-awareness that is required. for you to be able to absolutely and accurately understand the difference between what someone may be looking for and what someone may be needing. And when we speak to the need, that's the highest level of impact. So, if somebody said, well, Hal came out here and he shared some things that we were kind of looking for. And that's not to say that there wouldn't be any impact there, right? There's impact there because that's on the minds and the radar screens of those that you come before, right? But when you speak to what is truly authentically needed, there is a level of satisfaction. There is a level of introspective. There's a level, and I'm just going to use the word, there's a level of revelation and epiphanies that only come from speaking at that level. And the only way we can get to that level is to have that self-awareness. It's critical.
I think oftentimes I used to do a questionnaire. And I don't do it so much anymore, but years ago when I'd go to a school, I'd have a questionnaire with the same questions. It was to school leaders. It would say things like, "What are you most concerned about? What do you think your teachers, their top concerns are?" And then I'd give it to the teachers. What do you think your administrators' concerns are? What do you think your top concern? And it was amazing how different these things were. And it often came down to the distinction between wants and needs. As an administrator, oftentimes they believe their need is would fall on the side of data. We need test scores up. We need kids passing classes. We need attendance rates up. That's what they need. Absolutely, they need. And of course, I'm not saying teachers don't need that. They don't want that. They do want that, and of course they need. But what they really need is that feeling of being the most influential adult in the lives of their kids, while impacting that data, while delivering that knowledge and stuffing it into the noggin. Of course, we want to do that. But what we want to figure out is how do we use that as the vehicle to make a difference in the lives of those kids. And you're right, man. Like on the outside, for those people who have never been in the schoolhouse, it does sound like splitting hairs. But these are dramatically different things.
Yeah, and I want to say this, and you brought up a point that for those that spend time around me professionally and personally, in both of those aspects, if you will, realms, spheres of my own life, I say this quite often, and it ties directly into the data part, right? And just to kind of let folks know a little bit about me, I started out many years ago. I don't want to say how many years ago. I might give away my age. But I started out many years ago as a teacher, became a teacher leader, went back to school, got a master's, got into campus leadership, and have been very blessed and privileged to work at a district level for years now. And as well, reach folks through my consulting and leadership company, where I'm privileged, like you, Hal, to be able to share with folks literally across the country. And one of the things that I often say to folks is we're often talking about data, right? And how many of us have heard the question asked, what does the data say, right? We're data driven. We're all about the data, right? Yeah. And I want to say this, and I shared this with at my last speaking engagement a couple of weeks ago with some great folks up in the Philadelphia, southern New Jersey area. I shared this with them. I said that, data is great. No one is against quantitative measures, right? We all love quantitative measures. We all need quantitative measures. That's why we have speedometers in our cars. Okay, right? We need quantitative measures. But unless we understand the context in which those quantitative measures are placed in and are a part of and are intended to accurately reflect and express the situation of, data in that sense, that quantitative measure in that sense, really lives in a silo because it doesn't have the relevance. And so what I often ask folks is this, Vernon, man, the data says ABC, right? One of the first questions I will ask them is this. Okay, the data says ABC. Do we know the story behind the data? Have we talked to anyone? Have we talked to campus leaders? Have we talked to teachers? Have we talked to students? Have we talked to other stakeholders, those in the community? What's the context? Because here's one of the things that I learned years ago, right? I had been an administrative intern for a while I was in graduate school. And so as a newly minted part of a campus leadership team years ago, this is what I learned. I learned that numbers could say one thing on paper, right? But unless I had had conversations and unless I had entered into dialogue with all of the different stakeholder groups, including students, by the way, folks, that were a part of that data, I really didn't know the context. And so if I tried to develop an action plan, or as we sometimes say here in Texas, campus improvement plans, right? SIPs. For those that are here in Texas, you're familiar with SIPs, although they may be called something different in other states. When I tried to go ahead and put together a campus improvement plan, if I didn't have that context, or as we said a few moments ago, if I didn't have that level of self-awareness and awareness of others in the situation, I could be putting together a plan that had good stuff in it, but it really didn't address whatever the situation was.
Sure. I also think sometimes, and this sounds crazy because we put so much stake and effort into the data and into the quantitative and the numbers and trying to raise all of that. Man, it really seems to me from a teacher with that true teacher heart and a school leader with that giving, compassionate heart, that what we find in most of those really effective leaders is that data and that quantitative outlook on all of that sometimes, lots of times, is a superficial success. And here's what I mean. And let's say we have a group of kids that we need, they need to get that 70. We got to get that kid to pass. And we put all this effort and we set up tutoring groups and we have a Saturday blitz and we get them there on Saturdays and we got to feed them so they get them food there or get them there on Saturdays. And we do all this stuff and we barely get this kid to edge out a 70 or a 71 or 72. And now we have school leaders are happy, teachers are high-fiving. And think about what happened. What reality sets in. Here's what we really did. We took a kid and we spent so much time on something the kid isn't passionate about, the kid is not wired for, the kid has no interest in. That's not what they're going to do in life. And we gave so much effort to that to barely get them to be almost mediocre, like barely a 70. And what I find is that success and that achievement wears away really fast. What doesn't wear away is when we can use that as the vehicle to make a profound difference in the life of the kid. And instead of, saying it's about the math and getting the 71 in the math, what it is here's evidence of when you work hard and you persist and you don't give up and you find people to help you and you get a mentor in your life. Here's what's possible. You can have these great kinds of achievements, because that right there is really what the teacher needs, the kid needs, and the school leader needs, rather than what they want.
One of the things that I talk about often as a part of my business and a part of the great work that I do with the phenomenal people at EduMatch and EduMatch Books Publishing. Those folks are out there, I know, looking at this. Throw you a quick shout out, folks, over there, the team at EduMatch. Thrilled and honored to be a part of the work that they're doing. But one of the things that I talk a lot about at various speaking engagements are three core elements that are a part of the work that I do, right, in my consulting and leadership business and speaking business. And it's connect, impact, scale. And so let me repeat that again, because I know that no one would watch a Teach Like a Rockstar podcast without being prepared to take notes. So let me go ahead and repeat that again, right? Connect, impact, scale. And so I had the privilege, another privilege, to share with some teachers and engage in some dialogue with them about really their own teaching styles and how they reach students, right? And so this is the part that I just absolutely loved, Hal, about what you just talked about, going beneath the surface, right? Going beneath the 70 or 71 or 72. It's not to say that a passing grade is a bad thing, right? A passing grade is not, but I think really the question for us is there more? Yeah. Are we leaving anything on the table, right? And so I was sharing with them, this group of teachers recently about the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, or MBTI. Those of you that are familiar with that, you know what it is. If you don't, it's something for you to take notes on and maybe research on your own later. But in that context, I asked them about their teaching style before I really talked about that, right? And so the part about talking about that and bringing that into the dialogue was to develop their own awareness of who they were and who they are as teachers, right? And to let them know that whatever you're hardwired to be, that's how you're going to go ahead and teach, right? But then here's the next step that really speaks to what you just said, which again I thought was great, folks. If you didn't If you didn't take that down, you need to. And what Hal was talking about when he's talking about how kids are hardwired is, well, I shared this with a teacher and a secondary teacher. And the secondary teacher said, well, Vernon, I am a so forth, so on, so forth, so on, right? There's 16 different archetypes. You guys can research that later if you don't know what you are out of those. But there's 16 different archetypes. And he told me, he said, I'm one of the 16. This is the one that I am, right? And so we started to talk about how that was with him as a person, professionally and personally. And then you know what I asked him, Hal? This is what I asked him. I said, do you know that there are probably other archetypes like that in your room that are many versions of you? And he stood there and he looked at me and he said, Vernon, I never thought about that. And I said, yeah. I said, there are other archetypes that are just like you. There are many versions of you. And so when you're teaching, intuitively, you're speaking to them, right? But here's what else it gave us perspective on in real time in the moment of that dialogue was, and I asked him this, what about the other 15 archetypes? Yeah. What if you have students that are one of the other 15? How are we reaching them within our planning, within our discussions and PLCs? How are we crafting how we communicate? Because you guys know that master teachers are all great communicators. Whether they're in kindergarten all the way through 12th grade or anywhere in between, they're all great master communicators. How are we communicating to reach those other 15 archetypes?
Yeah. Man, this theme that keeps coming through our conversation, this sense of self-awareness is, man, I just don't know if we talk about it enough. And I often think of it in terms of demographics as well. I taught in a school where it was a really, really high performing socioeconomically, like way at the top of the scale type of school. It was brand new. We had a couple of grades when you opened it up, and it was a high school. And then we added the third grade. Then in the fourth year, we added a fourth grade. And so we had our freshmen, sophomore, junior, seniors in there. And then, and typical, I think the average home price, I'm going to guess, was right around $300, $350 in the neighborhoods around that school. And well, actually, there weren't neighborhoods around. It was a field that was around the school, but the closest neighborhoods. And then in those fields and the miles around the school, they started building apartment complexes and government subsidized housing. And so everything shifted. I'm talking like over the summer, where it was just a whole different school. And then within the next year, it was completely the opposite. It was so different. And then, of course, those parents were politically powerful, and they said, my kids will not go to school with these kids. And they went to a different school. And what we were left with within a year or two, it was a Title I school, 70 to 80% free and reduced lunch, and within a year or two. And so many of those teachers struggled because these were different kids. These kids, these parents don't come to open house. These kids, they did not demand rigor. These parents did not demand high expectations. And I hated those teachers. But then I thought, wait a minute. 2 years ago, I loved that teacher. That was an amazing teacher 2 years ago. Now they're ineffective and I don't like them. They just have the wrong kids. These aren't your kids.
And one of the things I want to say there, Hal, and just want to interject this in there because once again, it's just for that phenomenal, fabulous, rich dialogue that we're having. And I want to say this because some of you are probably saying, Hal, Vernon, man, this has been great. I've been listening to it. I've been enjoying it. I've been taking notes, right? Dare I say, can I use the vocabulary word copious?
There you go.
Copious notes, right? We've been taking copious notes. But you may be saying in real time, hey, they're starting to talk about demographics. I'm getting a little uneasy. I'm not really sure. What should I expect? Is this going to be kind of this thing where we touch on some sensitive things? I want to say this. And your story, Hal, really reminds me of a school that I worked at years ago that was a school of choice. And I was a teacher leader at the time, but I was also working on my master's. And so I was also an administrative intern also at the time. So I saw it from both sides, right? We start out a school with a grade or two, and then we add grades each year. Is this one of the things that I've learned over the years is really about what I'm going to call the 2 C's. All right. So if you're taking notes, I want you to go ahead and make sure that you get that down. The 2 C's, as in the letter C. So C''S, right? The 2 C's. And the 2 C's are curriculum and culture.
Yeah.
Curriculum and culture. All right. So let me make sure you got those down. The two C's, curriculum and culture. And what I have seen often, whether the schools are highly advantaged socioeconomic schools or highly disadvantaged socioeconomic schools, high performing schools, no matter what part of the city or what part of the state that they're in, the teachers understand, and I know that this is maybe a paradigm shift for some of you, maybe in the ways that you have been led to believe before in the past. But I want to introduce this to you here on Hal's podcast for you to think about, and that is this: culture always precedes curriculum. Let me say that one again, so make sure that you get that down. Culture always precedes curriculum. So you guys that know me, you know that I tell stories, right? I'm a storyteller. I love to tell stories, right? And that's one of the best pieces of advice I got from a mentor years ago when I was an administrative intern, was to become a master storyteller. So I'm going to tell a quick story, and then I'm going to go into sharing a little bit more about that, because this point, Hal, is just too good for me not to go ahead and take your lead on. You're doing a phenomenal job, and love your work, by the way. Folks, if you aren't connected with Hal, do that. All right.
Thank you.
And that is this. I worked at a school one year, and there was a gentleman, sixth grade science teacher, phenomenal guy. I mean, this guy is an absolute brain. Folks, I would sit there and I would listen to him talk as just a normal part of his everyday vernacular and conversation and dialogue. And I would just sit there, Hal, and I would be like, wow, like I have so much more to learn.
Yeah.
I have so much more to do, right? Phenomenal guy. He believed at his core that curriculum always came first. And he really didn't address the culture of the school and of that neighborhood. And do you know what happened, Hal? Unfortunately, he left the business and left that school before Christmas. At that one particular school, we lost four teachers, four, ladies and gentlemen, four teachers before Christmas.
Mm.
And I reflect upon, it's been years ago, I reflect upon that so much, Hal, because I wonder, in a part of town that where we needed the best, we needed the absolute best to really go ahead and help a community that was struggling. I mean, it was really the front lines. People talk about the front lines and articles and, things they see on TV. I'm telling you, in real time, in living it back then, it was really ground zero, a community that was in crisis. But we had perpetuated, and when I say we, the profession in general had perpetuated that curriculum always came first. But the teachers that really performed well, the leaders that really performed well, the communities that really had an impact, the educational communities that had an impact in that city community, were the ones that understood that the first thing that we needed to do was to understand the culture.
Yeah.
And then once we understood the culture, that gave us a context within which to put the curriculum. Let me say that one again, because some of you may be saying, Vernon, how, man, although this podcast is for other people, you're speaking directly to me and my situation right now. We had to understand the culture, so we then knew what curriculum within which to place the curriculum and the teaching. We needed to know what was the context. And if we teach and we do instruction without the context of the culture, we miss it, Hal.
Yeah.
We miss it totally.
I think it's so when we had that shift in our school, I think that was no one talked to those teachers. We never had the conversation. And I think up front, what should have taken place in retrospect is, and by the way, I struggled with the population we had at first. They just weren't my kinds of kids. I couldn't relate to those kids. I didn't have that experience growing up. I didn't know, so when the new kids came in, those are my kids. I understand that world, right? And so I had an easier time. The rest of those teachers, they were those kids that we had at first. And we had a new population come into our school. I really think someone should have sat down and had the conversation with them. Hey, listen, you got to make a choice. Go to another school and find your kids. Find the ones that you teach really well and you can, for whatever reason, be effective. Or you've got to figure out how to know these kids, because you can't love these kids until you know the kids.
And I want to say this, Hal, as well. And you made, yet another of the many great points that you have made so far. Folks, again, take copious copious notes. And it's this, you know, even if you had the level of self awareness at the time, how to really sit down with teachers one on one, or even small groups of teachers, right? Like in department meetings, PLCs, what have you, staff meetings, and to really have the conversation with them. Here's my wondering. Here's my wondering, Hal, and if you're living out this situation right now that Hal and I are speaking to in real time at your school or in your community or in your district, I want you to think about this wondering as well. My wondering is, even if you had been willing and able, Hal, would the other folks that could have been a part of those very rich dialogues, which I know that they would have been, were they at the time willing and able?
Yeah.
They were able, but were they willing, right? And I want to say something that goes a little bit deeper. And this is that Hal and I spoke to before on our last taping. And I want to make sure that I include this as well, because it speaks to what is happening in our communities and our country right now, right? And some of the things that maybe have been seen as dividing us as a country. I really want to say a couple of things about that to try to go ahead and promote healing and to bring all of us together. All of us are not all the same. We're all individuals. We're all different people. We come from different cultures, ethnicities, backgrounds, right? But I want to say this: anytime that we're not able to really address or think about or place a priority on culture before curriculum, again, those are the two C's. If you didn't get those down before, I want to go ahead and repeat those again: curriculum and culture, right? If we're not really sure how to discuss culture, if we're not really sure, how do I start a dialogue, a discussion about this? How do I extend this olive branch to Hal and say, Hal, I want to talk to you about this because I don't know, Hal. I don't know. And I want to share this story as well. I worked at a school that the first school that I worked at was 90% Hispanic in the student body. Okay. So a school with very, very, very rich Hispanic traditions. Well, there was a tradition I didn't know about. And those of you that are familiar with the Hispanic and Spanish culture, you will understand and you will know what I'm getting ready to say. And that tradition is called Dia de los Muertos. Dia de los Muertos. And that's Day of the Dead. Well, I didn't understand that because I didn't grow up around that, right? But guess what I had? I had someone there at the school, multiple people actually, that I could go to and say, you know what, Hal, I don't understand this. Explain this to me, Hal, because I want to understand.
Right.
And there's you out there right now, you want to unpack this. You think about it at home, you think about it at work, you think about it all the time. You want to unpack this, but you're not sure how to unpack it and to be perceived as genuinely caring. And I want to say this because Hal and I, again, we spoke to this on the last episode. Hal and I, obviously, we do not look the same, although we do have the same haircut.
No, we do.
Okay. All right.
Yours a little bit more polished on top. Mine's a little scruffy.
There you go. Right. It's all good, brother. But Hal and I are able to have these conversations. And notice Hal and I are not yelling at each other. Hal and I are not upset and angry at each other. We're not exchanging profanities or any kind of foolishness, right? It's a constructive, mutually respectful dialogue. Well, how are Hal and I able to have that? Because I know that Hal is coming from a good place. So if Hal messes up in terms of how he says something or in how he phrases something, and someone might immediately think, well, you know, Hal has a certain kind of such and such bias. Well, if I know that Hal is coming from a truly authentic and great place, I know, as we used to say when I was coming up, my elders used to say, I know that I charge that to Hal's head and not to Hal's heart. Okay. So if you're in this situation right now where you're wanting to say, you know what, I want to have this dialogue, I want to go ahead and encourage you to do this. Let others know that you're coming from a place that's truly genuine. And then go ahead and invite others to come from that place as well. That's where great dialogue starts, especially around topics that some people are maybe a little uneasy about unpacking, but they have a desire to unpack them.
You know, I remember being in one of my classes, and you know how oftentimes in this crazy teaching profession, we are often the students the students become the teachers. And we were talking about our classroom family that we're creating together. And so my approach was, it was always very intentional. Just like a campus, we have to really create that family, because like that's why people were quitting. You had 4 people left before Christmas, simply because it was just a job to them. It's easy. Hell, it's fun to quit a job, but it's really painful to quit a family. So we want to create a family for my kids, because they can quit school. That's easy. But to quit a family, that's really hard to do. And one of the things we always talked about was our core classroom values that we would have, and to be respect for one another, and the idea of acceptance came up, and then we started talking about just the word acceptance and what that entailed and what that meant. And I guess I liked the word, but in talking with these kids, what we all realized together is, we were looking for something more than just acceptance. Like, we wanted to celebrate the differences, because we felt like if we were just accepting of each other, that wasn't really where we could ask the deep, hard questions. But if we really wanted to know deeply, man, what is different? Let's figure out how different we are, and let's celebrate that. And then another kid in the class said, yeah, man, I want to find the weird and celebrate it. And I thought, you know what? Like, from the language of a student, of a child, like, I love that. Yeah, let's find out what's weird about each other, and then let's celebrate that.
2 words, folks. 2 words for what Hal just said. So if you're saying, man, that was a lot of stuff that Hal said, Hal is a deep thinking kind of guy. I fully concur wholeheartedly. Hal is a deep thinking guy. So if you're looking to condense that down into two words, let me go ahead and offer this up for you. Affirming identities.
Yes.
Affirming identities. And do you know what the best teachers do the first day of school, and really for some of them, the first week of school? And I've been in the business for a while, folks. As I shared with someone the other day, I didn't come out of new teacher school yesterday, right? Been in the business for a while. From kindergarten through the 12th grade, the best teachers use the first week to build culture, right? We talk about that, school culture. How many books have been written on school culture?
Sure.
A ton of books have been written about school culture, particularly the great folks over at Dave Burgess Consulting. Dave Burgess and his whole team over there have done magnificent work in their books and their publications about school culture. Within that work, what master teachers do, master educators, master leaders do with their staff members, right? So you're saying, well, Vernon, I'm not a teacher. I'm not either, but you're still an educator. You're in some position of leadership. Let me encourage you to do what I'm getting ready to say, and that is to do it with your staff as well. And that's this. Do you know the identities of the people around you? Do you know them?
Yeah.
And that's the reason why I shared the Myers-Briggs with that group of teachers recently, was because some of them have been going through their teaching careers, some of them veteran teachers, right? But they really didn't know on a deeper level who they were. See, I can't affirm you, Hal, if I really don't know who you are on a deeper level. But are we really taking time to understand and to know who we are? And so what you said about acceptance is great. But here's the thing, folks. I can accept something, but if I really haven't gone deeper to understand what that is, do I really understand why I'm accepting it?
Yeah.
Do I really have that understanding and that knowledge? And these are the different things. Again, if you're in a position of influence or decision making, whether you're at the campus level, district level, state level, regional level, national level, I want to encourage you to do this. Understand and get to know the identities of those in your sphere, those in your circles. Once you start to understand that, we go well beyond quote unquote acceptance, and we go into affirming. And guess what happens, Hal? Can I throw in a bonus for him, Hal? Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay. If we get to understand and affirm the identities around us, guess what we can do next? And if you're a leader, you need to write this down for sure. I can then elevate those identities. Let me say that again. If I get to know who the identities are, I get to understand the identities, I can then elevate those identities. Well, you say, well, Vernon, what does that mean? What does that mean? Like, what does that mean to me? Right? Here's what that means. What that means is this. If I understand that Hal has a certain type of personality and that Hal is driven, guess what I'm going to do as someone who would be a true servant leader? As a true servant leader, guess what I'm going to do for Hal? I'm going to go ahead and take every opportunity I can to showcase Hal's work ethic and commitment to what we're doing as a campus. And guess how that's going to make Hal feel? Number one, it's going to do two things. It's going to affirm Hal's identity, but guess what else it's going to do, folks? I sure hope you're taking notes. I hope you are. It's going to make Hal part of what Hal just said. It's going to make Hal part of the campus family.
Yeah.
And guess what happens if you're a leader that's responsible for hiring and retention at the district level or campus level? And I've been in both spots. Guess what it's going to do for retention of Hal? It's going to make Hal think, even if someone else comes to hire my talents, I'm going to have to sit down and think twice about this because I'm a member of the family. And that's just what Hal said.
Giving those opportunities for people to feel significant, like that's those basic human needs that I think we forget about. Sometimes we do a great job with our kids, but with our teachers on campus, making sure they feel connected and that they feel loved and that they feel a part of something bigger than themselves and that they matter. I think we underestimate the fact that they're going to achieve all those feelings somehow. We can either set them up and so that they can feel as a part of our family, or they're going to feel it in their small little group that hides in their team workroom together and don't come out. I was at a school where the entire freshman algebra team walked into the principal's office at the end of the school year and quit together. It was like this unified front. 7 of them. They all walked in and they're mad and they all put down their 7 letters together and we are leaving. Here's the crazy thing. It was the best school year I've ever had in my life. We were just talking about this is the best school, the best campus. This has just been an amazing school year with these kids. I've never felt so closely connected to peers and professionals in my life. But what we didn't know is they also had that feeling just among themselves about how much they hated it. And that became the little family that they ate together and stayed together, didn't talk to anybody together. And then as a result, so if you think about it, they really did feel the same things I felt. They felt a part of something bigger than themselves. That was their little group of 7. They felt important because they all complained together. They felt like they were connected. So they all had those same emotional human needs being met, just in a very different way.
And I want to say this too, and again, I mentioned this at a recent speaking engagement that I had, and typically, I want to say really within the last year or so, at pretty much every speaking engagement that I've had, Hal, I've tried to really go ahead and take a few moments to speak to what I'm getting ready to go ahead and share with our listeners and viewers right now. Particularly for those at levels of leadership, campus leadership and district leadership. And that's this. We are promoting, we are pushing, we're trying to implement, we're trying to have this impact around this thing called social emotional learning. We call it SEL in the business, right? For students. But let me go ahead and give you all a question to think about. And you may want to write this question down to reflect on yourself and then share with your peers. As we're trying to go ahead and implement social emotional learning for kids, for students, why is it that we have not really addressed the same thing for adults? And let me give you a second question as a bonus, because I know you guys are really enjoying this like I am, right? I'm enjoying learning from Hal. Every time Hal and I get together and talk, I learn from him. And I appreciate him sharing his wisdom and experience. How effective is an adult in terms of facilitating social emotional learning with students if they themselves have social emotional learning needs that haven't been addressed by their leadership teams? Something to think about.
We always say to our kids, but we forget it in terms of our educators. In order for them to be it, they have to see it. If I want to grow it, I got to show it to those educators. So whatever I want to see from them in my classrooms, they have to see that for me. If we're talking about having interactive lessons that serve these basic human needs, well, guess what? In our faculty meeting after school that we have for 35 minutes, they have to see a representation. They have to see what that looks like. If we're going to expect that they be that in their classroom, I got to show it so I can grow it in my people. And, I think the other thing is I'm just trying to think. I like to think about worst case scenarios where I have known leaders who this was not a part of their personality, but they learned how to do it and did it anyway. And I can remember, I'm not going to mention her name, but I had a principal, and she confided in me that, you know what she really felt deep down inside. Hey, this is your job. Just go in there and do it. Like, she wasn't all fluffy and compassionate and empathetic to adults, but she knew she needed to recognize them. So what she did, she split the 52 weeks of the year into four groups. So four groups of 13 weeks. And inside of those 13 weeks, she wrote handwritten thank you notes to every teacher in that school. So week one were the A's and B's, people's last names starting in A and B. Week two was the C's and D's, and the E and F on week three. And so every 13 weeks, everybody got a handwritten thank you note from her. And you know what? She told me, she goes, I hated doing it. I think they shouldn't. I wish they didn't need it. They just need to go in there and do their job. They're getting a paycheck. They need to do what they're told to do. But you know what? I know when I do this, they teach on such a deeper level, being that they're recognized and appreciated and affirmed.
You know what she realized, Hal? Here's what she realized in real time. She realized, and some of you, when I say this, again, you may say, you know what, Hal and Vernon, like, how did y'all know that this podcast was exactly what I needed? Right? So we're getting ready to speak to your spirit and to your heart right now. And this is what that leader did in Hal's life, his professional life. She realized that the people that she worked around, the people that were part of her school community, that were part of her school family, she realized that they weren't hardwired like her.
Yeah.
She was one of those 16 archetypes, right? But she realized that, you know what, in real time as a leader, the whole staff is not the one archetype that I am. They're one of those other 15. And so, you know what she did? And I want to say this too, and I am so really thrilled and pleased, Hal, that you share this story, because what she did is she didn't know all of the answers from A to Z. Let me say that again. She did not know all of the answers from A to Z, folks. But you know what she did? Here's what she did, Hal. She asked herself and really reflected on it. What is one simple task that she could do consistently to demonstrate her acknowledgement, or as we said the two words before, to affirm those identities? What's one simple thing? Now, today, could she go ahead and do a professional development around social emotional learning for teachers? Maybe not.
Probably not.
Maybe, like you said, maybe she's just not hardwired that way to really speak on SEL before groups of people. But you know what she did, folks? And if you're a leader, this might be the very thing that you've been looking for, or as Hal said earlier, needing, right? Along with everything else that Hal has shared with us today. And that's this: take one specific thing that is a simple action and take massive action on it consistently, and watch and see what a difference it makes in your culture. And as your culture improves, what was the other C? Your curriculum and implementation of curriculum improves.
Yeah. You know, I think also when she took that step to force herself, and it wasn't forcing herself after a couple of years, this became a habit, part of her daily routine and what she does, is now she has earned the right to ask those same things of her educators. You know, where, if I always say, man, like we're asking teachers to greet kids at the door, coming and going, which I think is critically important. But that's a hard ask. That's a tough ask if they don't have a school leader greeting teachers coming into the workroom, each and every day, excited to see them. Welcome home. Well, welcome home. Hey, what are you working on today? Tell me a success story about a kid in your life. Getting teachers in the right. It's really hard for as an educator who doesn't believe in greeting kids at the door to want to do that if they've never felt that themselves.
Absolutely. And so that's why, if I had it to do all over again, and if someone were to ask me, Vernon, if you could really design go back and add some different elements to your graduate school program for leadership, what would be some elements? What would be some things that you would add to take what was a phenomenal program and really enhance that even more, right? One of the components would be around school culture and school leaders understanding when we say school culture, what does that mean?
Yeah.
Right? What does school culture mean? Does it mean we're all happy and we all, smile at each other? all the time in that school culture, or is there something more to that? And then the other thing that I would really talk a lot about too as well, and it's what we need to be sharing with campus leaders right now, and that's this. Um, what are some very practical, simple things educators can do? And I want to share one thing right now, since we're on this topic, right? Because you probably have some folks out there again in leadership, and they're saying, how Vernon, this is phenomenal, man. I'm going to stop at the store and get me some stationery over how to go ahead and write some thank you notes, right?
Right.
And so you're probably wondering, what's another thing that I can do? And I want to share with you what a couple of principal friends of mine do, and they're just phenomenal folks. I really won't say their names because they're a little on the shy side, but they're phenomenal folks. And here's what they do. What they do is they go around to each staff member at their campus, whether it's a custodian, administrative clerk in the front office, paraprofessional, a teacher, what have you, right? Every single person in the school on the campus. And you know what they ask them, Hal? They ask them this: what's your favorite drink? What's your favorite drink that you would get at a drive-through at a fast food restaurant?
Yeah.
Right? Okay. You have to be really careful how you work this, folks, because we have to make sure it's school approved
For
beverages.
sure.
Okay. And no adult stuff there. But here's what they do. What they do is a few different staff members collect this list. They generate this list, right? And once they generate this list, they go out to the actual fast food places, to a fast food place, and they get all of these drinks that the staff members like.
Yeah.
And guess what they do? They walk around the school giving each staff member their drink in front of their
For
students.
sure.
And guess what it does with the students? It causes the students to look at their teachers in an even higher regard and an even higher respect. Or, in other words, if I may use the term, it causes the students to look at their teachers like rock stars.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was speaking to a principal, and she was taking over a campus. And prior to her arrival to campus, there was a lot of distrust, and there was just a lot of just that old style authoritarian leadership. This is my way or the highway, and she showed up with a very different personality, very different leadership style. But because of what these teachers have endured for years in a smaller community, they didn't trust her either, because they knew it's just a matter of time before you leave, and they're used to the hammer coming down, and but they didn't know that hers, but they didn't know what to. So this new principal did that same thing, where she asked everybody their favorite candy bar. What is your favorite soft drink? What is your favorite snack treat? A chip or a pretzel? What is your favorite? And she had a list of everybody's favorites, and then each week in her office, she put a buffet of all those. So she would say, okay, language arts, come on down. This is your week. Today is soft drink day, and tomorrow's your favorite chip day. And she had exactly what they wanted. Here's what happened.
Love that.
Here's what happened. She called me up and she goes, I've been doing this for 2 weeks. Not one person has come down to my office to get their treat. They wanted diet cherry Dr. Pepper or whatever obscure thing.
Right.
I have
Right.
it. Not one person
Okay.
has come down. I said, listen, put that stuff on the cart, put your Jolly Trolley sign on it, and you take it to them.
There you go.
Don't give up on them. Go. You have to earn it, man. You're the leader. Go take it to them. And finally they started to buy in just a little bit. But I think that is evidence of to say how deeply rooted on some campuses that level of mistrust is there, and what you have to do to overcome it.
You know what leaders aren't showing? Some leaders aren't, Hal. And then some leaders are doing an absolutely phenomenal job of it, and their campuses show it, right?
Yeah.
The campus culture shows it. The campus scores show it. It's this little word that begins with the letter E. And as I share this, I want those that are listening at the various levels in education, and even those that may be watching this that are not in education, because I know that obviously how you have a reach that is great, right? And that's this question: in your daily professional lives, in your daily scope, right? Have you shown empathy? And really beyond empathy, that E word, empathy, do people really see you as a human being? I'm talking about beyond the title, folks. Well, Mr. Wright, Vernon, I have a master's degree, I have a PhD, I have an EDD. I mean, I've been published in 6 professional journals, and I've done all of these different things, and I'm a speaker worldwide, and so forth and so on. In no way am I trying to take away from your accolades, but here's what I'm wanting to go ahead and let you know, right? And this comes from having been in the business for a minute or two, right? And being around some phenomenal mentors who I'm very grateful and thankful for. And that's this, despite all of your accolades and accomplishments, people have to see you as a human being.
Yeah.
If they don't see you as a human being, guess what you won't have? And this is an I word, right? I've given you an E word, which is empathy. I'm getting ready to give you an I word. And I shared this at a recent speaking engagement that I spoke of earlier up in the Philadelphia, South New Jersey area. And it's this, you're not going to have any influence. And I'm going to tell you, folks, as somebody who has seen this play out many times over the years in my career, where I have seen it play out firsthand, if you don't have any influence, you're not going to have another I. And guess what the other I is, folks? You're not going to have any innovation. So if you're sitting here and you're saying to yourself, Vern, I came into watching this podcast today and I'm really wanting to go ahead and have innovation at my campus or in my district or whatever my sphere of influence is. I really want to have this innovation play out. You have to ask yourself, do I have any influence with the people? Do the people see me as a human? Do they see me as a person of empathy? If the people do not see you as a person of empathy and see you as a person that is a human being, folks, your ability to lead and manifest innovation is going to be limited.
Yeah.
And that's just truth.
When we look at the most info, if we look at social media just as an example, and it's not the end all, but just as one example, it's those people that are the most honest and authentic and give the most real representation of their lives, both the good and the bad, their successes and their struggles. Those are the people that hold the most influence. And on the leadership side, in real world application, I saw a first year principal. He had a real challenging first year. He was assistant principal for a long time. Huge school. I think they have about 6,500 kids. And so that means they have like 15, 16 assistant principals, who some of those assistant principals were his teacher when he was in school. And some of those assistant principals have been building principals before. And now he's this young principal coming in. And so he knew the only way was to be completely real and authentic in every way. And when they started school in August, he sent out that questionnaire of, what are you concerned about most, to his teachers? Tell me something you're unhappy with that I can fix. And then that second faculty meeting had a few weeks in, he put all those together and he ranked them in order of what he thought was the most important in terms of the school, not for each individual teacher. It might be your most important, but how it's going to affect kids in the school. He ranked them in order and he said, and here's where I am in terms of my work so far. And every faculty meeting they have after that, he puts on that screen what he's doing, if he's been successful, where he's struggling. I know I need to do a better job, because you guys tell me you're 60% happy here. We're up where you were 20% happy before, but 60% is still failing. So I am still working, and here's where I'm working, and here's how I'm going to do it. And just that kind of honesty, is that alone, I know he's going to be successful, because people want to help. Like, they want him to be successful because he's so open and honest with those teachers.
Here's what empathy and true influence do. Empathy and true influence causes those that we interact with on a daily basis, it causes them to know this deep down in their hearts, their souls, and their spirits, to know that, you know what? Hal has empathy for me. Hal has influence for me, influence with me. So if Hal has empathy for me and Hal has influence with me, guess what else I believe about Hal? That Hal truly cares about me. And if Hal truly cares about me, there's no topic that Hal and I can't unpack.
Yeah.
And some of you have been wanting to unpack some things, and that, just like you said, Hal, it doesn't even have to be anything around race or socio-demographics, right? It can be around some other things that are pressing on the minds of educators within that school. Right? You talked about sending out the questionnaire, and I think that's a great idea. And you're wanting to unpack these things, but again, you're wondering, how do I approach this? How do I do this? How do I make this happen? How does this become what I want it to become? Right. And you're saying, and maybe you're one of those folks who you say, you know what, Vernon, how I'm not hardwired that way. I don't know if I can do this. Let me give you some guiding questions. What does empathy mean to you? Secondly, what does influence mean to you? And a third thing, which really Hal said, is this, if you want to grow it, you have to show it. And so really the introspective question for yourself is this: how can I live out empathy and influence? How can I live out empathy and influence and people see me as a real human being, not just the person behind this title, not just the person behind, if you have a reserved parking spot, this reserved parking spot, or this is the spot where I am on this organizational chart. I want to say this, and I won't mention his name because he's a little on the shy side, but there is a leader in our area, in the North Texas area, right? Dallas-Fort Worth area. And phenomenal guy. I knew this guy many, many years ago when he was kind of starting this upward trajectory in his career, right? And someone posted a picture of him on social media. He's very high up in leadership, and he was visiting a campus. Well, guess what picture they posted of him on social media? In a full suit, he was sweeping up a cafeteria.
Yeah.
And folks, I mean, here's a person that is a well-accomplished educator, widely recognized leader across the state of Texas, and he's sweeping in a cafeteria in a full suit, looking sharp, by the way. But he's sweeping in a cafeteria, and when people see that, they say, here's this person that has every right to go ahead and tell somebody else to sweep.
Sure.
But he's doing it. And what somebody shared with me many years ago, how a junior ROTC commander shared this with me when I was I started my high school career at a high school. He said, Mr. Wright, we call that participatory leadership. That's what we call it, participatory leadership. Phenomenal.
Man, I'm not sure. I always wonder if those things can be taught. I hope they can. I do know for some people it's just a natural thing and they just go make it happen. But, I was in up in Klein ISD. I was visiting a school and, hanging out with and this was true with many of the principals there, but one in particular, and we're going down the hall and we're having a conversation. And as we're talking, he's picking up every piece of trash. I'm talking like a staple, like a staple in the carpet. And he's picking it out with and he's getting the staple and picking up trash. He's moving trash cans. As we're having a conversation, he knows every kid's name. There's 4,000 kids in the building. He's hugging every kid. He's high-fiving teachers. He's asking about people's moms. He knows the story of everybody in that school, having tremendous success. I go to another school. And they were having some challenges in that school, and I'm hanging out with the principal, and he's taking me on the tour of the school. There's mess everywhere. He doesn't. I guess he doesn't see it. I'm hoping he doesn't see it, but he doesn't look at it. He doesn't handle it. Their kids and teachers are walking by. No one says a word to anybody. No good morning. No head nod. No acknowledgement. Nothing. And I think to myself, where do we even begin with this, principal? Is it possible to learn those skills, or does that compassion and empathy and concern for others just have to be a part of your heart already?
Let me drop this bonus, right? Because I know that we've been talking for quite a while, and folks, this has been a rich dialogue. Let me drop this bonus in here and say this, particularly if you are in a position that is a leader of leaders, right? So if you're in some type of position where you either work with, assist, or supervise campus leaders, hear me very closely when I say this, built upon the exact thing that Hal just shared about the first and second principles, right? And in that brief story that he shared with us, that brief story. And that's this. If you find a leader that is struggling with empathy and influence and those things at a campus, guess where else they're probably struggling with it at? Probably struggling with it in their own lives.
For sure.
So that's the reason why, and I will tell you this, many years ago when I was a newly minted assistant principal, I I kind of saw that with some other leaders that I was working with at the time, right? And I was kind of like, wow, this is crazy, because it was just like they were missing. There was something that was missing. And again, I didn't have that level of awareness back then that I do now, right? But I knew something was missing. Well, here's what I understood, Hal. Here's what I understand now. What I understand now is this: whatever it was that those leaders were dealing with back then, they were dealing with it 10 times as worse in their personal
Yeah.
lives. But because we didn't have, those of us that had the opportunity to have dialogues with those folks, because we didn't have that level of awareness and understanding, guess what we missed? We missed an opportunity to engage those leaders in discussions about adult SEL.
Yeah.
And that's what would have been the thing that would have turned around what we were seeing in the workplace, is when those leaders were able to begin their own SEL journey, social emotional learning journey, and start to heal inside. And as things got better at home, they get better at work too.
Man, I think that's where you are. You just excel so much more than me in that area, is remembering that for adults. And I'm right there. I forget it a lot. Where I'm really strong with kids, and when I see the behavior, I immediately go to the why, and I know the why is going to land me back somewhere in their personal life. But where I really struggle is remembering that with adults. And I think, because of your experience in leadership, obviously you're going to have just a better handle on that. But, it seems to me that, our personal growth really is the limiting factor of our professional growth. Where,
That was great. Al, please say that again. Please say that again, man. That was, folks. Did we not say copious notes? Please take them, folks. Copious notes. Share that with us again, Hal. That's great, man.
yeah, I really believe that, I can't expect myself to improve professionally if I'm not first improving personally, because my personal growth is the limiting factor of my professional growth. And if we're providing our teachers and our leaders and all the adults in our school family with opportunities for professional growth, that's great. And of course we want that. Of course we need it. But what's going to limit that accessibility to the information and the ability to perform is who they are personally.
That's deep, folks. And I'm going to tell you guys this. You all that I am so blessed and grateful that have come to know me and follow me, and even see me in person and speaking engagements. And for those of you that haven't had that opportunity, for those of you that have so graciously followed me on Twitter and social media, you guys know that I've been very honored and grateful, and I still am, to have been on several different podcasts. And you guys know that I'm real. And I often say this, as we say on the streets: real recognize real. And ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to tell you this: Hal just dropped some great stuff right there. And so you've been looking for the missing link. You've been looking for the key to unlock these doors that you feel are in front of you, that have been a challenge to you. And once again, just another phenomenal clue, another phenomenal point of introspection from Hal, for you, particularly the leaders, to really sit here and say, but for teachers also and other staff members, to really say, hey, you know what? I'm trying to go to the next level. How can I go ahead and grow in my personal life? And guess what? I'm going to tell you this, folks. When educators are having a hard time at work, when they're not growing personally, it makes everyone around them in their personal life, it makes life harder for them. So as you grow, guess what becomes even more so influential and grows with you? Your support system grows. So guess what happens when you take the step to really grow personally? Your support system becomes more empathetic. They display more empathy for you. Your support system at school grows. They display more empathy for you. And guess what happens? And there's some educators out here. I'm going to say this, and this may be a little sensitive for folks, but and it may not apply to some, but I know it applies to some folks that are out there in leadership. Some of you have been spending a lot of time at work when you haven't necessarily needed to, as a way to avoid going home, because you maybe feel like the culture at home is not the way that it should be.
Yeah.
So these are some things Hal and I are discussing that, yeah, we're talking about it within the context of his show, which is Teach Like a Rock Star. But, excuse me, but we're talking about some things here that Um, we're talking about, as we would say with kids, the holistic approach with children. We're talking about the holistic approach with adults.
Sure. I think, we say, a new level of teaching is going to require a new level of you.
I love that. Love that, Hal. I love that.
And here's what I really hope we can get more in a habit of doing is sharing what we're doing in front of our students, because what we're asking, remember, I have to, if I'm going to grow it, I got to show it. If I want to see it in my kids, I have to be it in front of them. So why not talk about what we're working on in our own lives in front of our kids? We just like the kids have, we want them to learn and grow and do homework. Well, let's talk about how I'm learning, how I'm growing, and the work I'm doing at my home in terms of making me a better person so I can serve my kids and my community and my family on a deeper level.
And guess what we call that, which is another I word. We've talked about influence and innovation. Here's a third I word, folks. You know what Hal just described? We call that impact.
Yeah.
That's it. That's impact. So, folks, if you're wondering, I wonder if I really have that kind of impact that Hal does. If you're able to say I'm having an impact in the workplace professionally and I'm having an impact with those in my personal life at home, folks, that's impact. Because I want you to really think about this. How many folks do you know that are authentically and truly having an impact in both realms, in the workplace and also too at home? How many folks are doing that right now and really doing it on a level that, is a genuine, authentic level? It's not just, kind of something that's put on kind of show, right? They're really truly living it out each day. That's impact. That's great, Al. I mean, that is awesome.
And I really think it has an exponential impact when they get both happening, and it has that synergistic effect where, if you're doing one, that's great. If you're doing the other, well, that's great too. But when you're doing both, I think that's when that synergistic effect results in an exponential impact where we can take it to a new level.
And you know what we call that? That's the S word, folks. We call it scale. That's scale.
Yeah, you know what? That's the funny thing, in whether I'm hanging out with my entrepreneur friends or my business friends, they're always talking about scale. You might be the only one I know talking about in terms of education.
Yeah, man. Look, you know what? And I'm going to share this with you guys. My master's degree obviously is in educational leadership, but some folks may or may not know this. But before I got into education, I was in the corporate world. And my business degree, my bachelor's degree, is a business administration in economics and finance. So I always share with folks that part of my DNA will always be the hustle, the entrepreneurial hustle and the business world and understanding that, right? And there's so many gems and so many different things that, are happening every single second of every single day in the business world that, if we have that level of awareness and education, we can really leverage those things. And I really hate to feel like or really hear about educators feeling like they have to reinvent the wheel, right? And I'm sitting here and I'm saying to myself, hopefully your leaders are sharing with you that, I don't have to go ahead and reinvent the wheel about how to go ahead and improve and change my life, right? Improve and change my life. There's some things that exist right now in other sectors, in other realms that have been used successfully for years. And guess what it is that I have to do, Hal? All I have to do is this. Reach and grab it and put it right here in my head, put it right here in my heart, and take action.
I love it, man. Thank you so much for being on the show. I can't, just the value that you bring and the difference you make in people's lives. I really, really appreciate you.
Man, let me go ahead and tell you that the absolute honor and pleasure is mine. Quick shout outs to all of the great folks at Disrupt Ed. Quick shout out as well to the folks at EduMatch Books and EduMatch as a whole as well. Let me go ahead and throw a quick shout out to Aubrey Patterson and Lori Harvey at No Hea Kindreds as well. And to everyone else that has followed me and has become a part of the #Zero Apology Zone movement, I am flattered, I am honored, and just very, very blessed. And always know this, folks, no matter what happens and what levels I aspire to and obtain, I will never, ever forget where I came from. And that's impact the right way.
Thank you, brother. You're amazing. I appreciate you. Have an amazing weekend.
You too.
This has been the Teach Like a Rockstar podcast with Hal Bowman. Subscribe, rate, and share from halbowman.com/podcast.